Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. You will see probably this in the title of this video, how to choke Putin and bring him to his knees. I am quoting one of the US senators from the great state of Louisiana, John Kennedy, it's his name. Many of you are familiar with him. I came across a video in which he is making some statements that I decided to present to you about Putin and Russia. Many of you know that I have visited Russia many times. I've spent really long time when you put all those trips together. So I have experienced Russia, of course, mainly Moscow, a little bit St. Petersburg. So it's a small percentage, very small percentage of what Russia is like. However, I got some sense from being there. Of course, as a tourist, it's very different. I stay in a good hotel. I had everything provided. I had my own money with me. So I didn't work there. I didn't pay the bills. I didn't have any credits or loans or mortgages or whatever. So I really don't know overall how it would be to live there. I think it's really about the mindset and many other things and the opportunities. And if you want to make it, you make it in most of the places in the world. And Russia, in my opinion, has a brilliant future ahead of her, absolutely. And before we start with this video, I want to say I don't agree with what he's saying, but I decided to play it for you. Why? Because I think maybe there is a very, very tiny percentage of truth as far as the economy. Of course, this is over-exaggerated. I'm not financial expert. That's why I will take you to the article from the Moscow Times from 19 hours ago. And this is about the economy. We see how they express it about Russia's economy nowadays. And then I will take you to what are the biggest exports products for Russia that also John Kennedy, the senator from Louisiana, is mentioning in this video. This is an interesting, I would say, research of how I believe majority of people still perceives Russia and the West. And before I play this video for you, I decided to read you the comments. Because the comments, even though most of them, I believe, are from US viewers, they are giving an idea what people know or how much they don't know about Russia and how easy they can believe anyone who makes a statement. But let me scroll down and read this. Almost 2,000 comments. I agree 100%. Thank you for speaking up, sir. Brilliant speech. Someone who lives in UK. Totally agree with this. So this one is from UK. I congratulate you much indeed. You have spoken 100 absolute truth of the truth with a very high intellectual capacity, wisdom, and education. Confronting Russian aggression is bipartisan issue both sides are finally agreeing on. We can use this to mend the fracture. So, a lot of people agree with what he said. A lot, by the way. I'm sure 99%, maybe I'm exaggerating, never been to Russia. And they don't really know what's going on there. So let me play this video and then we go to the Moscow Times and read about the economy that Senator Kennedy is talking so much about in this video.
I want to talk about just a few subjects briefly today in no particular order. I want to talk first about Russia and the war with Ukraine. Now, regardless of how you feel about the war in Ukraine, I think most fair-minded people can agree on two things. Number one, Vladimir Putin, who runs Russia, not the people of Russia, but their leadership, is a thug. He's a pirate. He has blood under his fingernails. He can't be trusted. And the second thing that I think most fair-minded Americans can agree on is that we would all like to see the war ended. President Trump has tried. And frankly, President Putin has treated our president, as I've said before on the Senate floor, Putin has treated our president like President Trump has taken the bullet train to Chump Town. He says all the right things when he talks to our president, and then he does the opposite. And I think he's disrespected America. He meaning President Putin. And I think he's disrespected President Trump. I think Ukraine is willing to negotiate a reasonable settlement. But it takes two to tango, and we're not going to have a settlement until President Putin decides it is in his best interest to stop the war. Not Russia's best interest, because I don't think he cares about his people. I think the war will stop when Putin thinks it's in his best interest. And I don't think he's going to think it's in his best interest until he feels the pressure, Mr. President. Because dealing with Putin is like dealing with most tyrants. It's like hand feeding a shark. Okay? You can't reason with them. You have to make them feel the pain. A lot of people think of Russia and think of Putin as this gigantic country with a lot of wealth and power, and that's not really the case, Mr. President. Yes, they have nuclear weapons, but actually the Russian economy is pretty small. The Russian economy, for example, the European economy is about $50 trillion. That's their GDP. The Russian economy is only about $2 trillion. New York State in America has a bigger economy than Russia. And I think we need to keep that in mind. Russia's economy is also not terribly diversified. It's mostly oil. Putin relies on oil revenues for about a third of his budget. Now, why am I saying all this? Because the Russian economy is not in great shape, Mr. President. They're spending almost all of their money, about 7% of their GDP, to fuel their war machine. And the Russian economy wasn't that great, frankly, to begin with. And if you sit down and just look at the numbers and the statistics, you will see that the Russian economy, at one point, inflation was through the roof. At one point, I think they had 21% inflation. I think if you look at the Russian economy, you'll see that many of the commentators in Russia think that, and this is coming from the Russian commentators, not from others. They think that Russia might be on the verge of going into a recession. And if you look at the numbers coming out of Russia, you will see that manufacturing in Russia is declining. You will see a lot of the consumers, ordinary people in Russia, tightening their belts. Inflation, which I alluded to, Mr. President, remains high. And the Russian budget is strained. The price of oil is down. Remember, I said Putin depends on oil for about 30% to a third of his revenue, and the price of oil is down. Their growth model in Russia, their model of sustenance, is based on the war, and they're starting to feel the effects of that. For example, in the first quarter of this year, the Russian GDP grew 1.4%. You might be thinking, well, that's not bad. It's not great, but it's not bad. The fourth quarter of 2024, though, if you look at the numbers, the Russian economy grew 4.5%. So clearly it's slowing. And once again, remember I said the Russian economy is based on oil. Why is it slowing? Well, number one, the price of oil is down. We know that. Number two, Russia is spending all of its money fighting the war with Ukraine, which has hurt other parts of its economy. The point I'm trying to make, Mr. President, when you're dealing with a tyrant like Putin and you're trying to bring him to the negotiating table, what you have to do is get him down and choke him. And the way to get President Putin down and choke him is through his cash flow.
They don't believe how toxic this is. If you're still using a plastic or wooden cutting board, you need to hear.
Putin, and remember, I'm not talking about the good people of Russia. I'm talking about their leadership. I'm talking about Vladimir Putin, the thug. Putin is only able to prosecute his war through cash flow generated by his sale of oil. That's the only way. Without that cash flow from oil, he can't continue. We need to cut off his money. We need to cut off his sale of oil. Now, we already have sanctions on Russia, and Europe has sanctions on Russia. But Russia has figured out how to evade those sanctions and continue to sell its oil. For example, India is buying a lot of Russia's oil. China is buying a lot of Russia's oil. But we can stop that. We have a bill, 87 of us have signed on, that would apply what's called secondary sanctions on Russia. And not only our bill would not only sanction Russia and its sale of oil, but it would sanction everybody who buys Russian oil. Big difference. Big difference. It would say to those who want to buy Russian oil, if you want to buy Russian oil, have at it. Knock yourself out. But you're not going to be able to do business with America. And you're not going to be able to use the American dollar, which is the world's currency, to do business in America. It will put Putin on his knees within 3 months. And he won't have any choice but to come to the bargaining table. Now, President Trump's been very patient. President Biden, he wasn't patient. He was giving. I remember when President Biden said to Putin, well, you know, we don't want you to go into Ukraine, but if it's just a little excursion, it might be okay. I remember that. What do you think Putin did? Remember, hand feeding a shark? He went right into Ukraine. President Trump, on the other hand, has really tried to be rational and negotiate with Putin and say, look, we need to have an amicable solution to satisfy both sides. Ukraine is willing. Putin has done nothing but embarrass our president and our country. The time has come to put Russia on its knees. And I hate to see it for the Russian people, but the time has come to put Putin on his knees. Get him down and choke him. And the only way you're going to do that is cut off his cash flow. And the only way you're going to cut off his cash flow is to cut off his oil sales, because that's at least a third and probably 40% of his money. We have no choice. Otherwise, this war could go on forever. Now, we have the bill locked, loaded, ready to go. We're waiting for President Trump to give us the high sign, because we want to stay together. The president's the one trying to negotiate the peace. But I hope President Trump will seriously consider letting us pull the trigger, because it's the only thing that's going to get Vladimir Putin to the table. I wish the world weren't like that. There's just some people, I don't know why I make it to heaven, I'm going to ask, but there's some people in this world, they're not sick, they're not misunderstood, they're not mixed up. It's not really that their mom or daddy didn't love them enough. They're just bad people. They are. And some of them run countries, and one of them is Vladimir Putin. So let's go do what we have to do.
All right, so thank you so much, guys, for sticking throughout this whole video if you had. I have to say, I'll be very honest with you, I used to like this senator a lot, especially during pandemic era. There were certain situations, and afterwards too, when I thought he really speaks so much common sense. But this, in my opinion, was quite a delusional speech. This sounds like someone who doesn't know much about Russia, in my opinion. And I'm not Russian, as you know, and I don't live in Russia, as you know. But it's very interesting how he really believes in what he's saying as far as Putin, right, goes. And I'm sure there are some people in Russia who don't like Putin. Majority does. But let me just take you to what I came across as far as what he said, that the Russian economy is weaker in comparison to New York economy. So I'm not sure who really runs Grok. Let's use Grok for that matter, and let's ask Grok this question, as I did right here. You ask Grok a question. So I ask, what is Russia's economy comparing to New York? And let's read this. Comparing Russia's economy to that of New York state or city requires looking at the recent data on nominal GDP and purchasing power parity, as well as acknowledging economic structures and contexts. Below is a concise comparison based on available information. So let's go through this briefly. Not going to read you the entire thing. You can look it up yourself. Nominal GDP, but this is from last year, 2024, approximately 2.17 trillion US dollars, according to World Bank data. Russia ranks as the 11th largest economy globally. So this was last year. I think Russia went up. I'm not sure exactly. And I don't know how much you can trust Grok, but let's read what it says. Maybe that's where Kennedy got his data and his information from. GDP 2021 estimate, this is just 1 year. Sorry, this is before the special military operation, was around 5.7 trillion US dollars, making Russia the 4th largest economy globally. And here you have the key characteristics. Now let's look at New York's economy. New York State nominal GDP 2024, approximately 2.3 trillion US dollars, slightly larger than Russia's nominal GDP. So what was it here? 2.17. I don't know, somehow, but maybe. And GDP 2021 estimate around 5.7 trillion, making Russia, this I read you already, sorry. So this we have here. New York City, nominal GDP. This is 2015, so this is really old. Around $747 billion, roughly half of Moscow. Claimed PPP GDP at the time, though direct comparisons are quickly due to differing metrics. Yeah, this is really old update here. So this is what Grok says. But now let's look at the products that Russia exports, okay? So he said that 30% of Russia's exports is oil. That's where he doesn't quite, why they cannot say Putin? Why they say Putin? Putin, not Putin, okay? So Putin, that's where he makes his money. Oh, all right, guys. So let's read this. In 2025, Russia's key export products continue to be dominated by fossil fuels, including crude oil, oil products, natural gas, both pipeline at LNG and coal. Other significant exports include agricultural products, chemicals, and machinery. So let's read this. Fossil fuels. Let's look at those. Crude oil. China and India are major buyers with significant volumes also going to Turkey and the EU. Yes, still the EU, everyone, in spite of the sanctions. Oil products. Turkey, China, and Brazil are key importers of Russian oil products. So just keep in mind when I read you the name of the countries, this is what Kennedy suggested to put the sanctions on all those countries that I'm mentioning to you, because those countries are, still buying the oil from Russia. Natural gas pipeline, the EU, particularly countries like Hungary and Slovakia, are major importers, often refining the gas into oil products for re-export. Natural gas, LNG, the EU, yes, still EU, China and Japan are significant importers of Russian LNG, and coal. China, India, Turkey, South Korea, and Taiwan are major buyers of Russian coal. Now we have other products as well, and that is agricultural products. Exports to Azerbaijan have increased. We're not going to read this because he just wants sanctions, I believe, only on those countries who buy oil, okay? Only oil sanctions. But other products are also chemicals, machinery, nickel, iron and steel, and fertilizers. So we have this. Now, I came across an article from the Moscow Times because I was doing a little research about Russian economy. So I want to show you this article, and I'm not going to read you the entire article, but I would like to show you, this is pretty new, the Moscow Times from 20 hours ago, as you can see right here. And it says, does Russia's economy have a debt problem? Record high interest rates have led to warnings of a systemic banking crisis in the next 12 months. How realistic is that possibility? You can see here Russian Central Bank Governor Elvira Nabiulina, this is the lady, and Finance Minister Anton Sulianov are in the picture. So let's read a little bit of this. It's a pretty lengthy article, but just a little bit. Amid record high interest rates and economy showing signs of slowing down, Russian businesses and analysts are warning of growing debt problem that could lead to a wave of bankruptcies. Here is what we know and what economists and analysts are saying. What are the warnings? Russia is entering its second consecutive year of record high interest rates, intensifying pressure on businesses as the central bank works to curb inflation largely driven by war-related government spending. The central bank started raising rates in July 2024, pushing its key rate from 16 to a peak of 21%, before settling at 20% in June 2025, so just last month. This prolonged monetary tightening has drawn growing criticism, particularly from the manufacturing sector, which relies heavily on credit to finance equipment and raw materials. Sergei Shemyezov, I think, chief of the state defense conglomerate Rostec, has blamed sky-high rates for shelved projects and liquidity shortages, while steel magnate Alexei Mordashov has warned of serious damage to metallurgy sector. Citing unnamed Russian banking officials, Bloomberg reported that the economy faces a credible risk of systemic banking crisis in the next 12 months due to rising levels of bad debt accumulated by firms. What are the troubling signs? Several warning signs indicate companies are increasingly struggling to repay their debts. The clearest sign is the rising share of company revenue going toward interest payments. business interest cost could exceed 15 trillion rubles, and that is 172 billion US dollars in 2025, compared to 11.5 trillion rubles, and that is 150 billion US dollars in 2024. And just 6.3 trillion rubles, which is $82 billion in 2023. Analyst Pavel Rybakov noted. In the first quarter of 2025 alone, companies paid, I will give you in dollars, 48.5 billion US dollars in interest, and that is up 58% on year, Rybakov said. This is very interesting article. Again, I'm not an expert, as you know. I'm not an economist. I'm not financial expert, but I'm sure many of you have more knowledge in this regard. This comes from the Moscow Times. So this is a portal from Russia. You know, if this is the case, I don't know. I just want to present this to you and ask your opinion, what you think. What do you think about that video also? Because let's go back to this video again. This really, like I said, I repeat myself, this really shows you the majority of people who really think like John Kennedy does. Someone says Trump should help Ukraine much more. But someone says here, peoples with double standards hosting Netanyahu and condemning Putin. How hypocritical can you be? Some people know, some people don't. I don't agree with most of your politics, mate. I'm left of center, but I'm 100% with you on everything you've said. Well said, and I hope your bill goes through. John Kennedy is a clear thinker on this topic. So here is another one. Thank you, Senator John Kennedy, for your straight talk of the situation. So what is the point here? He really wants to choke Putin and bring him to his knees by implementing sanctions on the countries that buy oil from Russia, right? So then those countries will not be willing to, let me stop sharing. So those countries won't be willing to buy oil from Russia anymore because they don't want sanctions from United States. So this is the vision, I think, if I understood his way of bringing Putin to his knees correctly. What can I tell you, everyone? I'm just going to attach the links down below in the description box. You're welcome to read this article yourself. Please let me know in the comments down below what do you think. I very much appreciate your support. Thank you so much for watching my videos, hitting thumbs up, subscribing, sharing, leaving the comments, and to everyone who joins me on Patreon, Locals, or donates on PayPal, huge thank you from the bottom of my heart. Lots of love, everyone, and remember, we are the leading edge and we are saving humanity. And we are not choking anyone. Bye, guys.